The sterile white walls of the military hospital were silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor and the distant rumble of thunder. Captain Elena Torres, once a fearless combat medic in the U.S. Army, now lay motionless in her hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. The war was over, or at least that's what everyone told her. But inside, the war still raged. Her body bore the marks of survival. A long scar trailed down her left shoulder from the shrapnel blast, and faint burns crept across her back. But the real wounds weren't visible. They lived deep in her chest, in the space where courage used to be. Narration. Before the explosion, Elena was known for her fire. She was a soldier who ran toward danger while others took cover, the medic who refused to leave a man behind. She had saved dozens of lives. But in one terrible moment, when her convoy hit an IED on a dusty Afghan road, she couldn't save them all. The explosion tore through the Humvee ahead of Hayes, killing 3 of her closest friends instantly. Elena survived, but the guilt followed her home. Now, months later, she sat in a hospital room with medals on a nightstand and night maze in her sleep. Every noise, every clang of metal, sent her heart racing. Every dream dragged her back to that burning desert road. Scene. Nurse enters quietly with a clipboard. Captain Torres, your next therapy session is tomorrow morning, the nurse said softly. Elena didn't respond. Her gaze was distant, fixed on nothing. The nurse hesitated, then added with a gentle smile, "There's someone special visiting the ward tomorrow. You might like him." Elena barely shrugged. She didn't want company. She didn't want pity. She wanted to forget. As the door closed, she turned to the window. Outside, the rain fell harder, blurring the lights of the city beyond. It felt like the world had moved on, and she was the only one still stuck in the past. The next afternoon, hospital therapy room. The room smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Chairs were arranged in a circle for group therapy, though Elena rarely spoke. She sat in the corner, arms crossed, expression cold and unreadable. Then she heard it, a faint jingle of a leash, a soft padding of paws on the tile floor. When she looked up, a golden retriever was walking beside a therapist. His fur gleamed in the light, and his dark brown eyes seemed to take in everything: the patients, the room, and finally, Elena. He stopped in front of her, tail wagging slowly. "This," said the therapist, smiling, "is Buddy. He's one of our therapy dogs. He's here to help us work through some tough days." Elena frowned. "A dog? You think a dog can fix trauma?" Her tone was sharp, defensive. The therapist just smiled. "No, but sometimes a dog reminds us that life isn't all pain. Would you mind if he sits with you?" Elena looked away. "Do whatever you want." Buddy, unfazed, sat quietly beside her chair. He didn't bark or move closer. He just sat there, tail still, waiting, like he understood that trust takes time. Minutes passed. The session went on, voices echoing faintly in the background. Elena stared at the floor, her mind drifting again to that awful day overseas. Her breathing quickened. The walls felt like they were closing in. Then she felt it, a soft nudge against her hand. Buddy had placed his head on her knee, looking up with calm, soulful eyes. For the first time in months, something inside her softened. Without realizing it, she rested her hand on his fur. It was warm, real, steady. Her breath slowed. Her heartbeat eased. Later that night, in her hospital room, Elena lay in bed, unable to sleep. The rain had stopped. In the stillness, she thought of Buddy's quiet patience, how he didn't ask anything of her, didn't try to fix her. He simply stayed. She turned over, whispered to the doc, "Maybe you don't know what I've seen, but somehow you understand." The word surprised her. It was the first time she'd spoken her feelings out loud since the explosion. As sleep finally came, the night maze didn't visit. Instead, she dreamed of golden light and a wagging tail. For the first time in a long time, Elena Torres smiled. And somewhere in the hospital's quiet halls, Buddy slept peacefully too, ready to begin a healing journey neither of them yet understood. The morning sun slipped through half-closed blinds, painting golden stripes across the floor of the rehabilitation room. Captain Elena Torres sat on the edge of a therapy bed, her hands clasped tightly together, eyes fixed on the tiled floor. It had been 2 weeks since Buddy first walked into her life. 2 weeks since a golden retriever had quietly claimed a space in her heart she didn't know was still open. But even now, she resisted. She didn't talk much to the staff, and when Buddy came around, she often turned away, afraid of how easily his presence made her feel something. She was a soldier. She wasn't supposed to be comforted by a dog. Also, she told herself. Scene, physical therapy room. The room was quiet except for the sound of crutches tapping on the floor and the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Elena's leg muscles still ached from the months of limited movement after the explosion. Every step reminded her of the day her convoy burned in the desert. Let's try a few more steps today, her physical therapist said kindly. Elena gritted her teeth, gripping her walker, pushing forward, but her legs trembled halfway. Frustration flared. I can't. Just stop, she muttered, sinking back into the chair. The therapist signaled toward the doorway. Moments later, soft paws approached. Buddy trotted in, tail wagging slowly, a leash held loosely by the assistant trainer. Elena sighed. Not now, please. I can't deal with the cheer squad today. But Buddy didn't bark or beg. He simply sat in front of her, his eyes focused, steady, patient, unwavering. And something inside her broke, not in a painful way, but in a way that allowed a single tear to escape. He leaned forward, resting his head gently against her knee. She didn't move, didn't speak, just let the silence speak for both of them. Narration, weeks later. Days turned into weeks. Therapy became part of Elena's routine, and so did Buddy. Every morning, he waited by her door. Every afternoon, he accompanied her through her exercises. Sometimes, she'd talk to him softly while brushing his fur. I don't sleep much, she'd say. You probably don't understand what that's like, dreaming of things you can't undo. Buddy would tilt his head, as if he did understand. One night, after a particularly rough group therapy session, Elena woke up screaming. The smell of burning rubber filled her dream, the cries of her comrades echoing. She sat upright, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. Before panic could take full control, she felt the bed shift slightly. Buddy had jumped up beside her, curling against her leg, pressing his warm body close until the shaking stopped. Her hand instinctively found his fur. Her breath steadied. The room, once filled with terror, felt safe again. She whispered, You're not supposed to be on the bed. Buddy licked her wrist softly in response. She laughed, a sound so rare and fragile that it startled even her. For a moment, she forgot the pain. Scene, outside the rehabilitation center. On a bright afternoon, the therapist suggested a short walk outside the center. Elena hesitated at the threshold. The world outside felt too loud, too unpredictable. Cars backfiring sounded like gunshots. The scent of exhaust reminded her of burning fuel. Her hands trembled as she tried to take a step. Buddy looked up at her, leash in mouth, tail wagging slowly, as if to say, one step at a time. She took a shaky breath and stepped forward. Then another. The air was cool. The sunlight touched her skin. For the first time since she'd come home, she felt something close to peace. Narration, closing scene. That evening, Elena sat in her room, writing in the small notebook her therapist had given her. Her handwriting was uneven, but the words were steady. Today, I took 5 steps without fear. Buddy walked beside me the whole way. For the first time, I felt alive. She looked down, and there he was, Buddy, curled up at her feet, snoring softly. She reached down and stroked his fur. You're not just a therapy dog, she whispered. You're my partner. The lights dimmed. Outside, the crickets sang, and in that moment, Elena realized something powerful. Healing wasn't about forgetting the war. It was about finding reasons to live despite it. And Buddy had become her reason. The first light of dawn spilled gently over the hills, brushing the world in gold. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of wet earth after the night's rain. Captain Elena Torres stood at the gates of the rehabilitation center, her duffel bag at her feet. Her uniform jacket hung loosely around her frame. She'd lost weight since her deployment, but there was strength in her stance again. Beside her sat Buddy, tail sweeping across the ground, eyes alert and loving as always. It was the day of her discharge, the day she would step back into a world she no longer recognized. Her therapist approached, holding the leash that Buddy wore. Elena, she said softly. "The board approved your request. Buddy's officially yours now." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. Her lips trembled as she looked down at him. "You're coming home with me." Buddy barked once, sharp and joyful, as if to say, "Of course I am." Elena's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. For the first time since the war, she didn't feel afraid of what came next. Scene, Elena's apartment, midday. Her apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. Dust motes floated through beams of light from the window. On the shelf were a few military photos, soldiers smiling, arms around each other. She turned one face down. Buddy wandered from room to room, sniffing every corner, tail wagging curiously. When he found Elena sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, he jumped up beside her, resting his head in her lap. "Feels strange," she murmured. "Being home, but not home." Buddy blinked slowly, his breathing calm, grounding her in the moment. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was peaceful. Scene, the first walk in the park. The next morning, Elena decided to try something her therapist had suggested, a morning walk. She dressed in simple jeans and a hoodie, clipped Buddy's leash, and stepped out into the open air. The sun was just rising, the park bathed in warm amber light. Children's laughter echoed in the distance, mingling with birdsong. Every sound made her flinch at first, but Buddy's steady pace beside her kept her grounded. They walked slowly at first. Every crunch of gravel underfoot was a victory. People passing by smiled at Buddy, and Elena found herself smiling back, awkwardly, but genuinely. A little girl ran up, giggling. "Can I pet your dog?" Elena hesitated, then nodded. Buddy sat calmly as the girl ran her tiny hand over his golden fur. "He's so nice," the child exclaimed before running back to her mother. Elena watched her go, a strange warmth rising in her chest. For months, she had felt invisible. But now, because of Buddy, someone had seen her. Narration, a new routine. Days turned into weeks, and the walks became longer. Elena found a small cafe that allowed dogs. Every morning, she'd sit outside with a cup of coffee, Buddy lying by her feet, eyes closed in the sunlight. The barista, an older woman with kind eyes, began saving a dog treat for Buddy every day. Soon, Buddy became something of a local celebrity. "Good morning, Captain," the barista would say. "And how's the hero today?" Buddy would wag his tail, and Elena would chuckle softly. Laughter, it still felt foreign, but it was coming back. Scene, therapy group reunion, afternoon. Elena returned to the rehab center one afternoon for a veterans group meeting. She brought Buddy with her, unsure how the others would react. But when she entered the room, the atmosphere shifted. The other soldiers smiled. Some even reached out to pet him. "Looks like you got the good one joked. Elena laughed, then grew thoughtful. "I think he got me, actually." As she shared her story, the panic attacks, the night maze, and the small moments of hope, she noticed something she hadn't before. The other veterans were listening, not with pity, but with understanding. And Buddy, curled at her feet, wagged his tail every time her voice grew steady. Scene, sunset, park bench. That evening, Elena sat on a park bench as the sun dipped below the horizon. Buddy rested beside her, his head on her knee. She whispered softly, "I used to think I was broken, that the war took everything from me." Buddy's tail thumped once against the grass. "But you," she smiled faintly, "you remind me that I still have something worth living for." She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small dog tag, not his, but Hayes. She had kept it hidden since her injury. Now, she slipped it onto Buddy's collar, right beside his name tag. "Now you're my partner, officially," she said. Buddy barked once in reply, eyes bright with loyalty and love. As the last light of day faded into twilight, Elena realized something profound. Healing wasn't a destination. It was a journey, and she wasn't walking it alone anymore. The rain started as a whisper against the window. Then came the wind, rattling the glass like restless fingers. Inside, Captain Elena Torres sat curled on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, Buddy asleep at her feet. It had been months since her discharge. Life had slowly begun to make sense again. She smiled more, laughed occasionally, and even started volunteering at the local therapy center once a week. But healing isn't linear. Sometimes, peace is just a quiet pause between storms. Scene: thunder breaks. A sudden crack of thunder tore through the night. Elena flinched, heart hammering in her chest. For most people, thunder was just noise. For her, it was the echo of war, the sound of explosions ripping through dust and screams. The blanket slipped from her shoulders as her body tensed. She couldn't breathe. The room around her blurred. The rain outside became gunfire. The smell of ozone became smoke. The flash of lightning was a flashbang. Her mind wasn't in her apartment anymore. She was back there, on the road, in the burning desert, surrounded by chaos. Scene: Buddy reacts. Buddy's head shot up instantly. He barked once, sharply, then jumped onto the couch. "Elena," she whispered to herself, trembling, "you're safe, you're home." But the words felt hollow. Her breath quickened. Her hands shook violently. She pressed them against her ears to block out the thunder, tears spilling down her face. Buddy climbed into her lap, heavy, warm, grounding. He pressed his body against Hayes, firm and steady, as if to say, "I'm here. Focus on me." His paw rested on her arm. His heartbeat was slow, calm, and real. And slowly, so slowly, Elena's world began to return. The smell of smoke faded. The noise softened. The desert disappeared. All that was left was her living room and Buddy's soft brown eyes. Scene: the breakdown. Elena clung to him, sobbing into his fur. "I thought I was better," she whispered. "I thought I was done with this." Buddy didn't move. He didn't need to. His silence said everything she needed to hear. After what felt like hours, her tears stopped, her breathing steadied. The thunder rolled on outside, but inside there was calm. She looked down at him and managed a weak smile. "You know, they gave you the wrong name," she murmured. "You're not just Buddy. You're my guardian angel." Buddy wagged his tail softly and rested his head on her knee. Scene: the morning after. When the morning sun filtered through the curtains, Elena was still sitting on the couch, Buddy beside her. A pile of tissues lay on the coffee table. The storm had passed, outside and within. She reached for her phone and dialed her therapist. "I had a flashback last night," she said softly, "but I made it through. I wasn't alone." Her therapist's voice was calm. "You're doing great, Elena. You recognized it. You grounded yourself. That's progress." Elena looked down at Buddy, who was watching her with gentle eyes. "Yeah," she said with a small smile. "We did it." Scene: later that week, therapy center. Elena attended her next session with a newfound sense of humility. She sat among other veterans, Buddy lying quietly by her feet. When it was her turn to speak, she hesitated, then said, "I thought healing was a straight path, that once you started feeling better, the pain would stop coming back. But it doesn't. It sneaks up on you when you least expect it." She looked down at Buddy, smiling softly. "But I'm learning that healing isn't about avoiding the darkness. It's about having someone, or something, that helps you find your way back to the light." The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the other veterans nodded, eyes misty. "Couldn't have said it better, Captain." Buddy lifted his head and licked her hand, tail thumping once against the floor. Closing scene: park, twilight. That evening, Elena and Buddy walked along their usual path. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the kind of sunset that made everything feel like a fresh start. She paused, looking up at the fading light. "You know," she said softly, "for a long time I thought the war stole my heart." Buddy stopped, looking up at her. "But now I think you helped me find it again." Buddy barked gently and nudged her hand, urging her to keep walking. Elena smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. The path ahead was long, uncertain, and sometimes dark, but she knew one thing for sure. With Buddy beside her, she would never walk it alone. The house was still. Soft sunlight poured through the window, casting a golden glow across the hardwood floor. Captain Elena Torres sat cross-legged on the rug, sipping coffee while Buddy lay nearby, his head resting on his paws. He looked the same, golden coat, soulful eyes, but his movements were slower now. His once bouncy trot had become a gentle stroll. He tired easily on walks. Elena had noticed the changes months ago but refused to acknowledge them. She told herself it was just age, that he'd be fine. After all, Buddy had always been her constant, her anchor through every storm. But deep down, she felt it. Something was changing. Something she couldn't fix with bandages or therapy. Scene: the vet's office. The sterile smell of antiseptic brought back memories of the hospital. Elena sat in the small examination room, fingers clenched tightly around Buddy's leash. The vet, a gentle woman in her 40s, finished her examination and looked up with soft eyes. Buddy's getting older. Elena, his heart slowing down, and his joints are giving him trouble. It's nothing unusual, but he'll need to take it easy. Elena swallowed hard. Is he in pain? No, the vet said kindly. Not right now. Just tired. He's had a long, full life, and you've given him the best one possible. Elena managed a nod, but her vision blurred. She reached down, stroking Buddy's fur. You hear that, soldier? She whispered. You're still the strongest one in the room. Buddy lifted his head and licked her hand. Narration, weeks later. The following weeks passed quietly. Their morning walks grew shorter. Buddy preferred to sit beneath the oak tree at the park, his eyes half closed, soaking in the sunlight. Elena would sit beside him, reading aloud from her journal, the one she'd started when her healing began. You taught me how to breathe again, she read softly one morning. You reminded me that life doesn't end when pain begins. It changes shape. Buddy wagged his tail faintly, his eyes filled with that same deep understanding that had always comforted her. Scene: therapy group, afternoon. Elena returned to her veteran support group. Buddy lying beside her as usual. But this time, when she spoke, her voice carried a heaviness the others hadn't heard before. Buddy's slowing down, she said quietly. He's been with me through the worst and best of it. And now, I have to start learning how to let go. A hush fell over the room. One of the younger veterans reached out and said, You don't lose someone like that, Captain. They stay with you even after they're gone. Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. She looked down at Buddy, who lifted his head slightly, as if to remind her he was still there, still fighting, just like her. Scene: the last walk. It was a crisp autumn morning. The park was quiet except for the rustle of leaves beneath their feet. Elena walked slowly beside Buddy, who moved at his own gentle pace. The air smelled of earth and rain. She stopped beneath the same oak tree they'd sat under countless times. Remember this spot, she said, kneeling beside him. This was where I started laughing again. Buddy laid down, his breathing calm and rhythmic. She brushed her fingers through his fur, golden like the sunlight that filtered through branches. For a long moment, neither moved. There were no words to fill the silence, no need for them. When it was time to leave, Buddy didn't want to stand. Elena crouched beside him, tears forming. Okay, she whispered, voice trembling. We'll rest a bit longer. She sat down beside him, hand resting on his back, feeling the slow, steady rise and full of his breath. The world around them moved on, children playing, wind blowing, but inside that quiet space beneath the tree, time seemed to stop. Scene: a gentle goodbye. A few days later, Buddy paused peacefully at home, curled beside Elena's bed. The vet had said it might happen soon, and Elena had prepared herself. But nothing truly prepares a heart for silence where love once lived. She buried him beneath that same oak tree at the park, wrapping his favorite blanket around him, the one he'd slept on since their first night together. On his collar, she attached her old military dog tag, the same one she had once placed beside his name tag. She stood for a long time after the burial, her hand pressed against the cool earth. I never said thank you, she whispered, for saving me. The wind rustled through the leaves above, soft and warm, almost like a sigh. And for a fleeting second, she could have sworn she felt his presence beside her, watching, waiting, loving. Closing scene: sunset, Elena's apartment. That evening, Elena sat at her desk, a single candle burning. She opened her journal one last time and wrote, Buddy wasn't just my therapy dog. He was my heartbeat when mine faltered. He was my light in the dark. And though his paws no longer walk beside me, I know his spirit still guides my steps. She closed the journal, a tear slipping down her cheek. But this time, it wasn't from grief. It was gratitude. She looked toward the window, where the last rays of the sunset painted the sky gold, Buddy's color, and she whispered softly, "Rest well, my friend. You knew my heart better than anyone ever could." The alarm buzzed softly. For the first time in years, Captain Elena Torres woke up without expecting to hear the soft patting of paws outside her bedroom door. She sat up slowly, the morning light spilling across her neatly made bed. The silence no longer hurt. It had become a companion of its own. But the emptiness still whispered sometimes, like a distant echo of what used to be. Elena reached for her journal, the same one she had kept since her recovery began. On the cover, taped carefully, was Buddy's photo, his tongue lolling, eyes bright, tail wagging mid-motion. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Morning, soldier." Scene, Veteran Center, midday. The familiar hum of voices filled the therapy room at the Veteran Support Center. Elena stood at the front, now dressed not in uniform but in casual civilian clothes. A banner behind her read, "Healing Through Companionship Therapy Dog Program Launch." She glanced around the room, faces filled with pain, hesitation, and curiosity. Faces she recognized, faces that reminded her of herself years ago. 6 years ago, Elena began, her voice steady but soft. "I walked into a therapy session just like this one, broken and angry at the world. I didn't think I'd ever laugh again, until a golden retriever named Buddy walked into my life." A murmur rippled through the crowd. He didn't care about my scars or my nightmares. He just stayed. Every time I fell apart, he was there, reminding me that love doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be present. She smiled gently. "So, today, we're starting something new, a program in his honor. One dog, one veteran, one chance to heal." The room erupted in soft applause. Scene, the training facility. Cut to a wide training yard outside the center. The sun hung low, casting long golden rays over a field dotted with dogs and handlers. Elena walked among them, clipboard in hand. German shepherds, Labradors, golden retrievers, all in training, tails wagging, learning to trust and comfort. She stopped by a nervous young soldier named Corporal James Reed, who was trying to get his new companion, a black lab named Luna, to sit. "Try not to command her," Elena said gently. "Just breathe. Let her feel your calm." James exhaled slowly, softening his voice. "Sit, Luna." The dog sat obediently, tail thumping. He looked up at Elena, surprised. "It worked." She smiled. "They mirror our hearts. When you find peace, they do too." As Luna leaned her head against his leg, James blinked back tears. Elena turned away, her throat tight. She knew that feeling too well, the first moment when light pierces the darkness again. Scene, the park, evening. Later that day, Elena visited the park, the same one she and Buddy had spent countless mornings in. She walked to the oak tree where Buddy was buried. The leaves rustled softly above, like an old friend greeting her. She sat down, brushing away a few fallen leaves from the small plaque she had placed there. "Buddy, the dog who knew my heart. Your love taught me to live again." She sat in silence, the sounds of children playing in the distance, birds fluttering across the sky. Then she pulled out a small notebook and began writing. Today, another soldier smiled for the first time in months. His dog reminded him that he's still alive. "That's your doing. Buddy, your love didn't end. It multiplied." She closed the notebook and placed a single yellow flower beside the plaque. Scene, montage, a ripple of healing. Musical notes, soft piano music plays as a montage unfolds. Veterans laughing as their therapy dogs nuzzle them during group sessions. A woman in a wheelchair smiling as a dog rests its head on her lap. Elena standing with a group of volunteers, teaching, encouraging, guiding. A wall of framed photos inside the center titled, Buddy's Legacy. At the center of it all, Buddy's picture, surrounded by dozens of dogs who came after him. The camera pans across faces, tails wagging, hands reaching out, humans and dogs healing each other. Scene, the beach, twilight. Weeks later, Elena took a rare day for herself. She walked along the shoreline, barefoot, the surf brushing against her feet. The sky blazed with orange and pink, the air filled with the sound of waves. For the first time in years, She felt completely at peace. She looked toward the horizon and whispered, "You were right, buddy. Life's still beautiful." A golden retriever ran by, chasing a ball into the surf. For a moment, Elena froze. The way it moved, the way it turned its head, it reminded her of him. And as the dog's joyful bark echoed across the shore, she smiled through her tears. Closing scene, voiceover and symbolism. As the camera faded to the evening sky, Elena's voiceover carried through. Love doesn't end when we lose someone. It becomes the air we breathe, the light we follow, and the lesson we carry in our hearts. Buddy taught me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering with grace. The final shot lingered on the waves rolling into shore, calm and endless, mirroring the heartbeat of the world, steady, alive, eternal. The sun rose slowly over the quiet town. Birds sang from the trees, and soft light spilled into Elena Torres' cozy living room. The once bare walls were now alive with photographs, pictures of veterans with their therapy dogs, framed letters of gratitude, and at the center, Buddy's portrait. A small wooden sign hung above it. Healing begins with love. Elena stood by the window, mug of tea in hand. She looked out at the garden, where volunteers were preparing for the day's event, the first anniversary of Buddy's legacy program. Her eyes softened. What began as one woman's healing had become a community's rebirth. I seen the training grounds. The center was alive with energy. Veterans walked side by side with dogs, Labradors, Retrievers, Shepherds, all in training to become certified therapy companions. Elena moved among them with quiet pride. A young soldier caught her attention, a woman, maybe in her mid-20s, with short-cropped hair and a haunted look in her eyes. She stood apart from the others, arms crossed tightly, avoiding her dog's gaze. Elena approached gently. "First day?" The woman nodded stiffly. "Yeah, don't know if this is for me." Elena smiled knowingly. "I said the same thing once." She crouched down beside the soldier's dog, a golden retriever with kind eyes. "This is Daisy," Elena said, reading the name tag. "She looks like she already likes you." The young soldier frowned. "I don't think I'm ready to feel again." Elena met her gaze. "That's exactly what I told myself, too. But Daisy won't rush you. She'll just be there, the way Buddy was for me." At the mention of Buddy, the soldier's expression softened. "Buddy?" Elena nodded. "My first therapy dog. The one who taught me that healing isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about learning to live through it." The woman exhaled, then slowly knelt beside Daisy, running a hand through her fur. For the first time, she smiled, small but real. Elena stepped back, heart swelling with pride and memory. Scene, the ceremony. A crowd had gathered under a white canopy decorated with yellow ribbons. Elena stood at the podium, the golden afternoon sun shining through. Beside her, a small plaque was draped with a cloth. She began her speech. "1 year ago, I stood beneath the oak tree in our town park, saying goodbye to the best friend I ever had. I thought my story ended there, but Buddy's love had other plans." She paused, looking at the sea of faces before her. Soldiers, families, volunteers, and dogs. Today, because of him, over 50 veterans have found healing through this program. They found not just therapy dogs, but lifelines, hearts that listen without judgment. She pulled the cloth from the plaque, revealing the words, "Buddy's Legacy Center for Healing, dedicated to all who fight battles seen and unseen." The crowd applauded softly. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. They were part of the moment. Scene, later that evening, the oak tree. As the crowd dispersed and dusk settled, Elena walked alone to the oak tree, Buddy's resting place. Fireflies glowed faintly around her, the air warm and gentle. She knelt, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers at the base of the plaque. "Buddy, the dog who knew my heart." She smiled through her tears. "Your mission's complete. Soldier, you saved me, and now you're saving so many others." The wind rustled the branches, carrying the faint sound of laughter and barking from the distance. Elena looked up at the sky, streaks of pink and gold fading into deep blue. A single star flickered above the horizon. She whispered, "I miss you, but I'm okay now." Scene, a surprise in the dark. As she turned to leave, she heard a soft whimper behind her. From the shadows emerged a small golden puppy, tail wagging hesitantly. Elena froze. The pup had wandered from the training area, its eyes bright and curious. "Hey there, little one," she said softly, kneeling. The puppy trotted toward her, sniffed her hand, then licked it gently. Elena laughed, a sound pure and light. "Well, aren't you something?" A volunteer ran up, breathless. "Sorry, Captain. This little guy slipped out during training." Elena looked at the puppy again, who was now sitting squarely at her feet, gazing up with unmistakable familiarity. She smiled. "You know, maybe he slipped out for a reason." The volunteer grinned. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Elena nodded. "Yeah, I think I just met my new partner." Closing scene. The next morning. The next day, Elena walked through the park, the new puppy trotting proudly beside her, a red bandana tied around his neck. They stopped beneath the oak tree. Elena whispered, "Meet your big brother, Buddy." The puppy barked once, bright, joyful, full of life. The wind stirred through the branches above, the leaves shimmering as if in approval. As Elena walked away, the rising sun painted the sky in hues of gold. Her steps were lighter now. The camera lingered on her silhouette, a soldier, a survivor, a woman reborn, and the small dog beside her, carrying on the legacy of love.